Here.
Thanks.
Don't try to impress anyone. You're brave, we all know that. Be simple, be direct. Nothing fancy.
Nothing fancy.
Hey, I'm serious. Nothing fancy, or you will shame my teaching.
I won't shame you. I understand.
Shai Hulud decides today if you become Fremen, or if you die.
موديب ساق مزمة جرم فحشة تجيب له لا دعاء وتشي ستيرجا
كنا اشتهى معاك تيشت.
This movie is the culmination of a lot of things for me. And from the first frame of the Sardaukar throat speech, saying like spice controls the universe, I'm in. Like the whole approach that Denis Villeneuve took was pitch perfect. And I have very minute criticisms to make. I have no bitching about what is or isn't in it, because what we have here is a special thing, a honed, jewel of a movie that fully gives you, finally for the first time, something that David Lynch couldn't provide, that Jodorowsky could never achieve, and that, the Sci-Fi Channel was never going to be capable of. As much as, there's things to enjoy about all of those other attempts and interpretations, this is the definitive one. This is the one that has its own sense of self. Everyone involved in it is utterly committed, and it shows. And I was just captivated by it throughout, even though people were smoking weed in my theater and stoned laughing at things that weren't funny. This just did everything right. It's better than I ever imagined. That's kind of where I'll leave it. But it reminded me a lot. I had the same feeling in my stomach as when I saw Fellowship of the Ring for the first time in theaters. This feels that transcendent. And
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, that is Chuck, and this is episode 39. Folks, it's not every week that we get to talk about quite possibly the two most consequential releases in film and TV of the entire year. But this week we're discussing Dune Part 2, the sequel to the very first film we ever did a podcast on. And we've got Chuck, the avid Dune stan, a big fan of the novel, and myself, the self-proclaimed Dune agnostic. I could really care less about the book. What did I think? What did Chuck think? That's what we're going to be talking about, that and more. But we'll be discussing that a little bit later. First up, we've got the Watchlist. We've got Shogun, the most anticipated TV show of the year, the big FX adaptation of the book by James Clavell. We've got a new doc about the New England Patriots, and we've got a new AMC Clive Owen joint coming up. But yeah, other than that, we're skipping the news this week. Please do like and subscribe. And Chuck, speaking of subscribing, we've got a little bit of news in that regard.
Yeah, in the last month, February was probably the most successful month this channel has ever had. And because of all the support we've been getting by the algorithm, a lot of you are clicking on our thumbnails when we're recommended to you. And not only are you watching, mostly till the end, you're hitting the subscribe button. There are 61, new souls, who have inflated our subscriber count well over 100. Just like a month or so ago, we were celebrating breaking 50, and now we're at 131. So, big shout out to all of you. We really appreciate it. I appreciate your engagement as well. Especially if you have audio tips, because since I'm not a professional and just sometimes throwing this together at the last minute, I fuck up a lot. So I apologize if the music bed drowns out Matt on occasion, or if I tune myself too low for some reason because I'm trying not to wake up my family in the middle of the night. We're doing what we can, but we, do try and put out something sincere, something homespun, and authentic, unsullied by, offerings from corporate sponsors and the like. And yeah, like you said, we're doing away with the news section because in a way, there's an entry in the watch list like almost doubles as a news section on its own, just because of all of the stuff outside of the content that we might be discussing. But I think we should just get right into it. I have started and stopped the pilot episode quite a few times before I was able to get through it, just because my life is crazy, not because it wasn't good. Because, yeah, like you pointed out, Shogun, it is the thing on TV right now that I think is must-see television. Just like the original miniseries, from the 1980s was, what we have here is something really special. But like, yeah, as someone who's really fresh off of reading the book, what's your takeaway from the first thrust of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so far it's really, really great. I'm about 700 pages into the book now, so about 2/3 of the way through. And as far as like a show that we've only gotten 2 out of 10 episodes of so far, I can say that for like a 1-season adaptation of a 1,100 page book, this is so far like pretty pitch perfect. I really like the stuff that they're keeping in. I think that they were right to do away with some of the stuff they did do away with so far. I mean, a lot of it is just Blackthorn's sort of like a gape at how the Japanese culture is, like him just being like, "You're like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?" Type stuff. And so they're doing away with a lot of that. I mean, you still get some of that, but and it also a lot of the stuff with his crew in the beginning. But yeah, so far I think this is a really great adaptation. And yeah, speak a little bit about Blackthorn himself. I want to give a shout out to this Cosmo Jarvis, who I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen anything with this guy in it. I would have to go back and look at that, but it seems like they just plucked this guy out of like an English pub at like 3 a.m. and we're just like, here, be in this show, dude. And his voice is so distinctive, and it reminds me a lot of the actor Peter Mullen from people would probably recognize him best as like the cop from Children of Men. Yeah, he has that similar sort of gravelly voice. And what do you think?
I agree with you completely about Mr. Jarvis. He is a true gem that they came across, and it does remind me of the way that Chamberlain did it originally. They had that same kind of like, there's a refinement to the way that he speaks, his diction. It rings very similar in my opinion. And and you kind of mentioned it, but they did do away with a lot of the Orientalism, like the total outsider perspective, like of like the original series and of the novel to an extent, I'm sure too, because they actually bring us into the world of like of all the Japanese players, like their interactions and like the things that are actually going on. The larger scope of it is handled in a way that actually makes it easier to understand. It's a very coherently made piece, thus far, and we have this in the notes, but everyone is comparing this to Game of Thrones, and they are just people just need to like broaden their imaginations and their horizons a little bit. This is better than anything Game of Thrones ever did. That is my fucking hot take. This is superior content to anything Game of Thrones was doing. Game of Thrones was trying to be things like this, like that kind of high class, like best-selling literature, it's a fantasy history thing that leaned heavily on the history. It wanted to be this, but like the series that they have made, it's better than Game of Thrones. But but don't call it the next Game of Thrones. Don't call it that.
It's so weird because it's such a weird comparison to me, because I mean, maybe even this is a stretch, but maybe you could compare it to like the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones when the show was still sort of about political intrigue and like alliances and double crossing. But the second half of that show just got so lost in the sauce of like CGI battles and just all the like woo-woo supernatural bullshit. And so I don't understand the comparison at all, really. And so I think it's just a good headline more than anything. And
it's clickbait.
It is very, very strange. But yeah, you commented about the Orientalism, and I would agree with you there. But the one thing I am glad that they do keep in for the most part is the racism between the two.
Yes.
The Japanese hate the Portuguese and the English and all the other guys, Spanish, and it's vice versa. They all hate each other and they're all racist towards each other. And I'm really, really glad they kept that in because it is integral to the eventual like gaining of like the mutual respect between Blackthorn and Toranaga, because eventually they do sort of learn to tolerate each other and then eventually sort of become friends. And so I think it is integral, and I'm so glad they kept it in because I could totally see an adaptation of this where they're just like, nope, jettison all the races and we can't have that in a show in 2024, so I could totally see that.
The DEI brigade did not sully this thus far because that is part of its core strength. It stayed based, for lack of a better term, to like what the original work, and then the whole like historical backdrop. Like there's no modern day bullshit just in there for the sake of it, just so like people can feel better about it, and we're all better off for it. Like I'm going to be watching this every week.
Yeah, same. I am very excited to see where it goes, and there are certain scenes that I just cannot wait to see that are like, people will know them, like I don't want to spoil one, but there's a scene where a character like almost commits like almost suicide. And then there's a scene where there's like a dinner party with Buntaro, and that is fantastic scenes. And I cannot wait till they get to those. And I'm sure that we'll get both of those. And I'm sure there are certain scenes that we won't get, like the weird like brothel sex toy scene. I can't see them putting that on FX. Maybe if this was an HBO show.
But I don't know. But like, don't they have like the FXX, branding? I don't know. Like, I could see them pushing the envelope a little bit, but you just might not. Yeah, I don't know. They also want to put this on Disney Plus, so maybe they have to be careful. And
we'll no doubt be talking about it again. Well, this is something we'll bring up probably multiple times.
But then here's the inverse of that. Here's why you shouldn't watch the new shit. Because I already am on the record about True Detective Night Country. I have engaged in a lot of, camaraderie with my fellows who also are baffled by the experience. And I did have a very spirited conversation with a lone, dissenter who was an obvious fan. And their complaint largely just boiled down to me not appreciating the predicament faced by Indigenous women or something like that. But now that the finale is behind us, where do you view the whole season? Like where are you at with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I'll admit, I was on board with what this show was selling initially.
As was I.
I think. Yeah, like I think my comments specifically were, I don't think this is True Detective, but it's, a pretty fine mystery show. But the problem with these types of shows that have a sort of like central mystery is you're only as good as your final resolution. And unfortunately, the resolution for Night Country was just so unsatisfying, full of plot holes. And it was pretty much guessed by the fans from the very beginning, like the actual explanation for everything. And I don't know, I think in the end, for me, probably the only real good things I can say about the show are I thought Jodie Foster was, pretty good. She often is pretty good.
Disagree.
She only... Really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I hated her.
I still liked what she was doing. And I thought, I mean, the setting of the show was good too. I mean, you had a really, really unique setting, and they really kind of squandered that in the end. But yeah, I guess we'll start there. What did you not like about Jodie Foster?
Well, I guess honestly, I shouldn't be directing my ire at her because she's doing the best with what she has. She is on the record as having to have rewritten scenes for this show. The scene where Hank dies, she is on the record, and as are the other members of the cast are on the record saying that they had to rewrite it because as Lopez did it, it didn't make sense. And she just has this ooey gooey like appreciation for how involved her cast was in fixing her work. And so really, I just hated how her character could only, say the word fuck or some variation of "you're asking the wrong question." Like it I don't know. What was missing was an actually internalized individual character, and there was only so much that she could give us through, emoting. And so I don't know, even the sex scene was cringe as fuck. And I didn't get a lot out of it. I just got disappointment. But yeah, that squinting face, that was the only expression she had, unless it was a smirk or a scowl. And that's true of every character in this. But yeah, I don't know, that I am a hater. There wasn't a lot about this that I was looking forward to coming back to week. And
sure.
And that made it really hard to stay invested as everything devolved. Because I don't know, we have to be honest. There are enough plot holes to drive a Mack truck through this thing. We could spend an entire episode just naming it. There's hundreds of YouTube videos getting into it. Shiva's right foot in particular does a good job with it.
Well, one of the things that naked baby,
naked girl, what's up?
So to speak specifically about elements of plot holes and just sort of stuff that isn't made good upon in the show is one of the things they did with this. I think one of its most egregious sins is the callbacks to season 1 because
they're inexcusable.
They amounted to absolutely nothing in the end. And one of the arguments that I'm so sick of hearing about this, specifically about the callbacks, is a lot of people who are trying to defend them are basically saying oh, the callbacks to season 1, they're unobtrusive. They're there for fans of the show, but they don't get in the way of new viewers' enjoyment. And first of all, why do you pick up watching a show in the 4th season? And secondly, you can't just cover for the shitty implementation of world building by just saying oh, it's the TV equivalent of dangling keys in front of the face of a baby. So it's totally cool that it amounted to nothing. That's totally cool. And so that's probably my biggest problem.
And I want to hone in on that because it speaks to a larger concern I have with the whole approach that not only Lopez took and HBO took with its creation, but with how the media is treating it. This is, I'm sorry, but this is a show for dumb fucking people who don't fucking think about anything. They just watch it and they don't actually process it and consider it. And which is what you're invited to with a fucking complex prestige detective murder show. You're supposed to be thinking about it. You're supposed to be chewing on it after from the 6 days between. But no, they just want you to go, ooh, and Lopez literally says that. She's it's the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. Ooh. That was their approach. They just wanted to create excuses for people to point at their TVs and go, he said the thing. And they think,
exactly.
and they think they did that it's high art, that it's the best that this series has ever seen. Is it delusion? Or are they literally just being propagandists?
Well, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, because if people don't know, basically what Chuck is referring to is the critical reaction to this show is so different than sort of the general audience reaction. Right now, The show currently has 92% critic reaction on Rotten Tomatoes, 57% audience reaction, and then on Metacritic it has a score of 81 critic, and then a score of 37 general public reaction. And so
absurd.
What I think is behind this is critics are obviously much more tuned into like the discourse around movie making, like everything from who is making the show to the creators, who is becoming a fan of the show, who the show is made for, like identity wise. And it's two things. It's they're afraid of liking or disliking a certain show that will somehow contribute to some sort of imaginary greater cause that they think exists, that either like politically or morally aligns them with a certain group of people that they either want to be aligned with or want to avoid being aligned with. And then secondly, it's clear that for a majority of critics on sort of the scale of importance, this show being agreeable with their ethics and their identity is more important than actually judging the show on a qualitative level, where, you know, they see something like Night Country and they think, I really like this show because I like what it's saying about feminism and environmentalism and the plight of Native women. So I will endorse this show regardless of its shortcomings. Never mind that, never mind the actual quality. And so I think that's kind of what's behind it.
But that's really what infuriates me, though, because it doesn't engage with any of those topics with an ounce of substance.
Oh, yeah. It sucks.
It
totally
sucks. It sucks. It's honestly, it is outright offensive in the way that it glamorizes suicide. Like,
yes.
And
vigilantism.
Yeah, and vigilantism. Like, I could not get over how, Navarro literally could just get into like a full-on like brawl where she likely should have been murdered, by the men beating the shit out of her. But of course, this is Issa Lopez, so obviously she like kicked both of their asses off screen, and survived. But if you're bleeding out your fucking ear and you just show up to work the next morning like you had a bad night out, like that's preposterous. It's also preposterous that she wouldn't be like arrested herself for what she did. And this is, just a comment on a criticism of my criticisms in that regard. Yeah, Marty Hart is a dirtbag who did illegal things, was a philanderer, and just a piece of shit. But guess what? He had consequences for that. Like, he suffered for his choices and his lack of ability to be a good person and to live up to his responsibilities and expectations. He wound up alone eating TV dinners and having horrible dates on Plenty of Fish, because that's where his life sent him. And he was able to find an ounce of redemption along with his toxic pessimist, who eventually came around to the idea that there's an afterlife. So, like, there's so much going on in that first season, even in that second one, especially in the third one, than like in a single like drop of this. Like, it's so surface level, and it's like it did not treat any of its subjects with the respect that they think they're giving it. Like it's almost, and like it's almost chauvinistic in its approach towards women, which is bizarre. Because there's no one calling it out for that, apart from, the Forbes critic Eric Kane. Everybody else is just, oh, so lovely. My heart just flutters. Issa Lopez is a master, like that kind of bullshit. And I have to admit, like, if she hadn't come out the gate instantly just casting aspersions on like people who liked the first season, if that season didn't exist, you wouldn't have a fucking show, lady. You'd still be making movies in Mexico that no one has seen. If there hadn't been, Nick Pizzolatto doing what he did over like the years that we had those 3 seasons. And God, but she is like, have you listened to her interviews?
No, I mean, I've been trying to avoid it for the most part.
It's rage bait, and I've been biting every time. I just can't believe that she actually believes the things she's saying. Like,
well, I don't think she does. I think she's just trying to save face because, as we alluded to, she put all this stuff in this season, way back when this show was in pre-production and in production, she put all this stuff in the season to bait season 1 fans. And then when the actual show comes out and she's not getting the reaction that she was expecting, then she is suddenly against all the season 1 fans. Then she's suddenly like, oh, actually, I don't like any of you, and I never did. And she's just trying to save, she's trying to save face. And it's clear that she wanted the approval of season 1 fans.
But I guess that this is the larger point that we're kind of dancing around, but it applies to, like this is the inverse of why Shogun works so well, why Dune works so well. But they have taken something that had an audience and they're chasing that mythical modern. It's what happened to Star Wars. It's what happened to Star Trek to an extent. Anytime it's like I know people like those God of War games, but Sweet Baby Incorporated definitely had something to do with certain elements of those. How that game transitioned from what it was to what it is. And they're doing that with a show that's 10 years old. Like, there's no reason to try and update True Detective to the modern day. It is of the modern day, in my opinion. And instead, they have to shake off all of us that were there before, that built this fucking thing, through our attention. And now they're gonna, and I guarantee you, when the ratings of season 5 don't match season 4, it's gonna be all our fault because we got the message and we tuned out. Because I'm not gonna be watching any more of this as long as Issa Lopez is involved. Because I kind of set myself up. At the end of my minisode about this, I was like, we can only pray that no one involved in this has anything more to do with it. And why would they not double down with how successful it's been in the ratings? But why do you think that is? Is it just all of us hate watching it and all of them love watching it? Or is it just because it's a prestige show on HBO and people need something? Like what fueled its success? Because it doesn't make sense.
I think you're right there in that, it's HBO. It's from a series that people were looking to have a return to form with. And also, it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, where people wanted to know what the central mystery was. They wanted to know the answers. They wanted to know, what was going on. And unfortunately, we literally didn't get that until the very end of the last episode. And when we did, it's too late. You've already watched the entire show. You've already given HBO your viewership, so it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, I think that's probably a lot of it too. Yeah,
spoilers here, but honestly, this is my recommendation, not to watch it and just be spoiled. But I kid you not, Matt, on the very first 2 weeks of this show being released, on the True Detective subreddit, those couch detectives fucking figured it out. Someone literally typed down, I have weird vibes about the crab ladies. They definitely had something to do with this. This is definitely just some lame feminist revenge fantasy bullshit. And I literally said to this person, I was like, if that's what it is, I'm going to kill myself. But I'm obviously in jest, but it's but holy shit. That's what happened. That's what it was. And it was revealed in the lamest way possible. And the whole premise just falls apart as it's presented. You could do what they did. It's a classic thing to have the invisible killer in detective fiction. It's everyone's done it, from Sherlock Holmes to Agatha Christie. It's a thing. But with how obviously they telegraphed it, why do they think they're so fucking brilliant? Because half of the point of that, having that as your villain, is that even the reader doesn't see it coming, but we all saw it coming. It was the most obvious thing, and how it all tied, the spider web, the Charlie Day conspiracy chart, literally was just string, and it's a straight line. There's no convoluted mess going on here, even though this series was ridiculously convoluted for something so simple. Yeah, I mean, I think it was their attempt at, again, doing what season 1 did, where,
they're like, oh, the killer was actually this person that you never would have thought of, that, was from like 3 episodes ago. And because, season 1 did that so well when they sort of had the Reggie Ledoux sort of red herring. And then it just ended up being the lawnmower gardener guy from that school. And it was sort of, I think it was just her attempt at trying to do that. But it just came off as so obvious, because that sort of like, that fish factory or wherever all those women worked, whatever that was, it was one of the only locations in the show that they visited once and then like never again. And then everything else was either always, the Salal station, the police station, their houses. And it's like, oh, that was strange. Why did they go to that weird like fish factory like one time and like interview these women who like are never in the show otherwise? And it's because, of course they were like, oh, they were the killer. The old woman goon squad was the killer, And
see, this is where I just say, no, I don't accept that. There's no security footage of them coming on Salal Station. There's none. There's no like tracks in the snow from their cars or their feet. Like, how fucking incompetent are these fucking people as detectives that they don't literally tear Salal Station apart and find the secret lab on their own? Why did they have to go through a fucking ice cave to find it? And I don't know. And just also for the record, it is utterly unscientific that mining pollution would melt permafrost. I know that for a fact. The premise makes no sense. And even if that was the case, you would want to have more control over the amount of whatever substance it is you're introducing to the environment, and just not trust it to the random runoff of a mining company to make it happen. You'd want to be able to fine tune it and hone it and get it right. But these aren't actual scientists. They're not doing anything believably scientific. They are literally just there to freak out because some ice samples got destroyed and then murder a woman. For the record, they didn't even have the this is the people who made this. That video of Annie K's testimony, when did she record that? And if you look at how she dies and how it's presented on her phone, it doesn't match up. It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, none of it makes sense. This is so like, midwit, like smooth brain, just not thinking beyond the surface level. And yeah, I think it's probably about time we get off this.
Yeah,
but
I know.
yeah, I think suffice to say, I don't think either of us will watch season 5. And I don't know. I mean, I know you have like some love for season 2.
I do.
And a little bit for season 3, but I still have sort of the mind that True Detective should have ended with the first season.
And I don't disagree with you. That's honestly a thought I had. I was like, I would give up those 2 seasons to just have that one. That's enough.
Yeah.
We don't need a second season of The Outsider. I hope they aren't making another one. But that's another example. It's like sometimes one is enough. And this constant returning to shit just ruins it. Especially when they're handing it off to a filmmaker capable of only seeking an audience that is truly the lowest common denominator. She disrespects you if you try and think about what she does. Now, I'm gonna jump over what's like next on the dock and just get this palate cleanse out of the way, because Angie and I spent the weekend in Dickinson last weekend, and I got to watch some DirecTV available channels, and I got to watch like 4 episodes of Monsieur Spade, coming at us from like, I think it's AMC. That's who we get it from. But this is so good. It does like if you like season 1 of True Detective, this is pretty fucking cool. Not only do you have Sam Spade being played by Clive Owen, who's one of my favorite actors, but you actually have a truly competent mystery story that's really compelling, with a lot of moving parts, with a really fucked up inciting event, involving a bunch of murdered nuns. like it is worlds better, way better. Like the French detect, like your policeman who begrudgingly has to deal with him, is memorable. But everything about this was memorable. I wish I could have finished it, but it was left incomplete for me. But it made me so happy that at least somebody fucking gets it out there. And you please watch this because I need more of it. And now we'll.
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
Oh, real quick. I've been kind of on the fence about this, but yeah, I will definitely check this out now that you mentioned this.
No, it might just be my antipathy towards True Detective talking. My enthusiasm. I will give you it if it's not the best. I'll grant you that.
Is it kind of like because this is based on a book, right?
I guess I was unsure about that.
Okay, I guess I don't know for certain, but its sort of feel or its sort of vibe is kind of like is it like Perry Mason or something, or what is it? What is the sort of feeling that this show?
It's Perry Mason, but without all of the histrionics and like all of the overstuffed like design. It's very grounded. It's very parochial in its setting and in like the cast of characters. It honestly reminded me a lot of like old BBC like comedy dramas, honestly, because it has a light touch, but when it gets dark, and it's really compelling, and you're really like because there's a time jump that happens after the first scene. Spade comes to France because the mother of a little girl has died and paid him to return her to her father, and her father is a outright fucking degenerate scumbag thief who lives in this rural town. So he takes her to an orphanage, he falls in love, and then he never leaves. And the story picks up after his wife has died. He's found out that he has emphysema and probably should stop smoking. And then this guy who's been a derelict father, the rumors start coming in that he's back in town, and then things pop off from there. But it's a very human take on the Sam Spade character, who admittedly I only know from the Maltese Falcon. So like there's lots of like characters being like, oh, I've heard about you, Monsieur Spade. Are the stories true? And he just like has something pithy to say to it. But yeah, it's like what if Sam Spade moved to France, stopped drinking whiskey, and sipped on wine in the morning? So it's very chilled out. It's a easy listening, or easy viewing experience until the dead nuts. Moving on now to the last entry in the watch list this week. We have the new hotness. Every sports team needs a comprehensive documentary series. So, what do we make of the Dynasty?
Yeah, this is the new New England Patriots doc on Apple TV Plus, and I guess, I mean, the sort of best way to describe this is The Last Dance without any of the bite, because I see it as either like a way for Patriots fans to relive their glory days, or just sort of like a compilation of info that we've already gotten in other places. If you've been paying any attention to the Patriots over the years, there's really nothing particularly insightful about this. And I mean, I can see this being completely fascinating if you have somehow never come into any of this information over the past, like 20 years or whatever. But for the most part, it's just kind of a paint by numbers doc series. And I think there really is, I mean, there is no insightful info, and it's best illustrated by literally every question that they field at Bill Belichick he just says, oh yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. And then that's it. And so, yeah, what did you think?
I agree with you completely, because like that's what this wants to be. But the difference was that The Last Dance was novel. Like in its whole creation and its approach, we waited so long. So like it had been teased and talked about and whispered about in rumors that there was something like that on the horizon. And then it, of course, had the benefit of coming out during COVID. That really captured us. And I'll admit, this just isn't as compelling as Michael Jordan. It's so scattershot. It's like Tom Brady, for as great as he is, and Bill Belichick as great as he is, they stop being interesting very quickly. And the other people that I wish we heard more from, like Ernie Adams and like some of the other the minor players like Lawyer Malloy, like we just don't really hear enough about like what what was it like on the inside? Because you got genuine insight from The Last Dance. We heard perspectives and heard some like warts and all statements and recollections on stuff, and people walked away from it with a sour taste in their mouth. Some of the real people, I mean. But with this, it's so massaged and curated. Ernie Adams is like, I'm taking my secrets to the grave. You'll never find out, the truth about Spygate. And that's unfortunately why, like you pointed out, like NFL Network's America's Game has given us the story of all of these Super Bowls. So they waste a lot of the airtime on other things that also have had documentaries made about them. Like I don't know if they've released it yet, but the Aaron Hernandez gets his own whole episode from what I understand.
Yeah,
and
I've seen it.
And how many documentaries about that do we have? I know, granted, they didn't have a lot of official statements from the Patriots in there, but like, was that one at least any good?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was pretty interesting, but there's only so much that you can cram into like a half-hour episode. I think that particular episode was only like 35 minutes long, and they really gloss over a lot of his crimes, or at least the crimes that he was suspected of, but they could never prove. And they focus, specifically on the murder that got him put in prison. But, I would encourage anyone to go look at Aaron Hernandez's Wikipedia page, because the crime section is like 20 paragraphs long with all of these like incidents that he was suspected of perpetrating that they could never prove. And they just kind of they gloss over all that stuff, and so it's incomplete, I guess I would say, the Hernandez episode. And it's weird how they're jumping around in time, because I think that now that Hernandez is like out of the way, they're gonna go back and talk about like all the other guys that were recruited during the same time period, like Gronkowski and like Welker and I don't know. I think Edelman.
Edelman, yeah.
Edelman, yeah.
But okay, like just on a sports related note, have they gotten to the Eagles Super Bowl yet?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, because like there is one story that I want to know the truth on, that I hope they get into, because the guy that caught the interception in the Seahawks Super Bowl at the goal line to win that game, I think his name was like Barnett or something like that. That dude was cut from the team like the day before the Super Bowl. No one knows why. So like that's like the one mystery that I'm holding on to that we'll get some insight into, because that's really what I'm here for. I want to know more, and I hope that they show us how the dynasty falls apart. Like I want to see the end of Bill Belichick. I want to hear what he has to say and Kraft has to say, but this might just be on what's in the book. And the guy that wrote the book wrote the scripts for the documentary as well, from what I understand. So I don't know how far into the future it goes, but I would hope that they'd put a little work in and get something about the end there.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's nice. It's a good thing to watch on my free sample of Apple that my new TV gave me. Now let's move on to the main event, though. I have a sleeping boy in my arms, and it just, I need to set this up properly, because you're talking to somebody who at like the age of 6 or 7 annoyed his father with requests for him to read the Hardy Boys so much that the guy reached towards his bookshelf and pulled Dune off of it and read me all the way up to like the end of the Gom Jabbar chapter. And then he said goodnight and and tried to put me to bed while I'm like freaking the fuck out over what he's just read to me, because I just didn't understand it. But before I read Lord of the Rings, before I even really cared about Star Wars enough to like call myself a fan of anything apart from Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles, I was a Dune fan. and I had like read all those books up to God Emperor before I was 10. So I've internalized this shit. I care a lot about it. And I understand people who maybe, are like a little confused, by how breakneck part 2 is and how languid part 1 was. But I really think people need to view both of these movies as a singular entity. It cheapens both of them to view them as separate and be like, oh, part 2 is so much better than part 1. That you're looking at it wrong. It's like comparing volume 1 and volume 2 of Kill Bill. That thing was written as a single document, and in the film industry mores required it to be broken up. Kind of like in this, because you could not possibly get people to sit for 6 hours, basically, to watch this thing back to front. I know I'm gonna, especially if they put out some extended cuts. But this movie is the culmination of a lot of things for me. And from the first frame of the Sardaukar throat speech, saying like spice controls the universe, I'm in. Like the whole approach that Denis Villeneuve took was pitch perfect. And I have very minute criticisms to make. I have no bitching about what is or isn't in it, because what we have here is a special thing, a honed, jewel of a movie that fully gives you, finally for the first time, something that David Lynch couldn't provide, that Jodorowsky could never achieve, and that, the Sci-Fi Channel was never going to be capable of. As much as there's things to enjoy about all of those other attempts and interpretations, this is the definitive one. This is the one that has its own sense of self. Everyone involved in it is utterly committed, and it shows. And I was just captivated by it throughout, even though people were smoking weed in my theater and stoned laughing at things that weren't funny. This just did everything right. It's better than I ever imagined. That's kind of where I'll leave it. But it reminded me a lot. I had the same feeling in my stomach as when I saw Fellowship of the Ring for the first time in theaters. This feels that transcendent. And I'll hand it off to you. Daddy. What's up?
Yeah, just to remind people again, I don't really have that much experience with Dune. I've never read any of the books. And, I don't want to sound too overly sentimental, but this is the type of movie that we should be thankful that we still get, as rare as it happens nowadays, as this sort of Hollywood industry keeps collectively tightening their belt tighter and tighter. This is like a film that makes you glad that you were alive to see it, basically.
Yeah.
And that you don't die before the next entry comes out. And I'm really reminded of that sort of analogy that people often apply to art as commerce. Good, fast, and cheap, you can have 2 out of the 3, but you can't have all 3. And I think, when you apply that to something like a blockbuster, it looks more like you can have a high budget, you can have creative control, or you can have mass appeal. You can have 2 of those, but not all 3. And Denis Villeneuve has somehow done all 3. He is a filmmaker that can do all 3. He has sort of achieved the Christopher Nolan level of complete creative control and mass appeal. And this movie is going to do gangbusters, and it totally deserves to. And he really has to be commended for bringing something so massive and weird, but somehow still comprehensible to the screen. And
Yes. Yeah.
he's like the rare director that somehow has gotten better as his budgets have gotten bigger and bigger. And usually it's the other way around, where filmmakers lose their artistic integrity as their budgets get balloon. And just fantastic. I also thought it was absolutely fantastic.
The maximalist approach, it serves his style well. It serves this story well. Everything needed to be huge and big and wide open. The first time that he rides the worm, Like I was genuinely gripping my seat because unlike any other interpretation of this, it actually felt dangerous and real, and like everything had gravity to it, and like you pointed out, comprehensible. It has a clarity, and it was just so forceful with how it would transition from when it cuts. It's cutting from planet to planet across the universe sometimes, and it's never jarring, and everything connected and flowed so well. And that's a testament to the work that went into adapting this. There's a majority of that book is on the cutting room floor, and that's fine because it would not have made for a good movie experience to have every little like moment and like lines spoken into, and like there are things that like as like if I was an absolute purist, I would consider unforgivable. Like the fact that Chani is kept in utero throughout the movie. Not Chani, Alia is kept in utero throughout the movie. I would say that that's blasphemy. How dare they do that? But it just would have bogged everything down. They telescoped, like 5 years worth of plot from the book and just kept what was important. All of the attacks on the spicing operations were so fucking awesome. The whole detour on Lady Prime is perfect. They did it right. And I'm gonna defend Leah Sedu's Margot Fenring character. She is the only one who got all of her scenes and then some. Hang on a second, honey. I'm talking.
Yeah,
I'm done with the show.
To speak on that, one of the things that I like about this one compared to part one is that there are more characters getting satisfying arcs where there's fewer characters on screen whose small amount of screen time basically reduced them to like window dressing or just kind of like fan service because they were afraid that there would be like a riot if they didn't include certain characters. And Margot Fenring stands out to me as one of the characters in this that her scene I guess is essential, but her character just kind of seems like I don't know how they would have done it without her, but she just seems, I don't know, are they setting something up, I guess is what the question I should be asking. Is she in like further entries in a more substantial way?
They're probably planning to insert her into Dune Messiah is my guess. Or they're trying to plant the seeds for the Sisterhood series, but from what I understand, that's supposed to be set thousands of years before the Dune movies. So it's hard to say. Yeah, it is kind of thankless. It's just to kind of explain through showing what the Bene Gesserit are about.
Yeah. Because she basically, I mean, what she was essentially doing was she was harvesting his jizz, basically, right? And then, like, so that they could create another Messiah in case he were to die or something, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just hedging their bets, basically.
Okay.
And that's the thing. They did a good job of taking stuff that was obliquely delved into in the book and like kind of like putting like creating their own scenes to make it more concrete and understandable. Because otherwise it's like you have to surmise what's going on to a degree. But often the characters in Dune kind of in the book spell out exactly what they have, like what they're about, so you don't have to think too hard. If I remember correctly. Margot shows up for that one scene in the book and then she's gone. Okay, I'm fairly sure. I don't even think she comes back in Dune Messiah. I might be wrong about that, but I don't remember her being there. And people complaining that the Spacing Guild wasn't like present at the finale. It's like, calm the fuck down. Like they're gonna get their time. Like we don't like. I think they're just mad that they don't have more meme content to farm. Because it's like me and the boys coming back after the walk at Thanksgiving. You're like wearing the Dune helmets, like the and I'll take it. Where was I gonna go with that? But in general, like characters that I feel like really were fleshed out well.
Yeah.
Still gone. Javier Bardem, I loved his performance. I loved the way they wrote him. I'm talking. No, not till I'm done with the show. You need to quiet down. But I loved that. Like the way that he progressed, like they heightened his religious fanaticism a little bit more. And that worked for me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked Bardem's character. I mean, he seemed much more fleshed out than the first part, and his sort of his sort of blind, I guess, fanaticism, I guess is what you call it, was really, really interesting, especially in juxtaposition with Chani. But the one character that I wanted to hit on, or one of the characters, was Butler, Austin Butler. I thought he, as far as like screen time to like memorability ratio goes, I mean, he was up there because his, you already alluded to it, but the scene on Getty Prime is probably one of the best scenes of the film, the sort of black and white shots. And then I really loved like those, like just the small details, like those weird, like liquid fireworks that they were shooting into the air. And then like his, the duel at the end, the knife duel, everything down to like just his weird, like mocking, like may thy knife chip and shatter. It was just such a great character moment. And, I thought he was pretty good. I mean, there was a couple instances where his Elvis accent was still, slipping through his Stellan Skarsgård impression, but for the most part, he was really great.
Yeah, I loved the detail how, like, if you're just standing within knife's reach of him, your throat's gonna get slit and then you're gonna get fed to his concubines. Like it still had that nastiness and grossness. Like the Harkonnens were so evil, and that worked for me quite a bit. What did not work though from the Harkonnens was Raban. Like what is with the love affair between Dave Bautista and Denis Villeneuve? What is that? Why are they such good buds?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it all just stems from his appearance in Blade Runner. But Bautista is probably the one guy who didn't work in the movie. And I don't think it was just that he didn't really need to be there, but it was also, I just thought his performance was not very good, because it was so one note, and it's just him yelling, like I'm so pissed off, just like
rats.
Yeah. And it was just, I don't know, I guess it was almost comical at some points. And I think that there's just too much baggage with his portrayal of Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, because there are sort of some parallels between the characters there, or at least how the characters were portrayed by him. I don't think he's as great of an actor as people would like to admit. And so, yeah, his stuff could have been cut, and I'm really glad that he died so quickly when Josh Brolin finally killed him, and that was good. But to speak, I guess Josh Brolin. He probably had just about as much screen time as Bautista, but did so much more with it because, I like that he got his little like guitar thing. I know people were concerned about that coming over from the books, and then also just there is that one scene where Paul pulls out the like Atreides ring, and you can see it on Gurney's face how much that meant to him as he's like standing there. And I thought that Brolin did a lot with a little. He was great, and that's that is a lot of the characters in this series. They're doing a lot with a little, and it's sort of a testament to the actors, the strength of the actors.
Yeah, like everyone is giving their all. Like you can see that they're all pretty committed and invested. Christopher Walken's Joe Biden impression as the Emperor was a very prescient take to have.
Yeah, he was interesting.
Yeah. Why don't you take the lead for a second? I got to deal with this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I guess to like speak a little bit more on other people. I think the MVP of both of these movies, as far as side characters goes, it's got to be Charlotte Rampling. I mean, just she gets the assignment, I think, as far as her sort of role as like the leader of the Bene Gesserit. Just fantastic, and I love the look that she like shoots at Jessica during that end scene in the throne room. I guess the looks that they're shooting at each other, and how, you know, they give her and Lady Jessica pretty much the final lines of the film, and I think that was awesome. And I was just talking about Jessica and Charlotte Rampling, Rebecca Ferguson and Charlotte Rampling. I love that. I love all their interactions in that throne room, and how they essentially give them like the last lines of the movie as they're sort of talking to each other, psychically or telepathically. They're talking to each other, and they're sort of, I mean, they're almost setting up the next film and with what they're saying to each other. But I just love that.
And that's what I appreciated. It's like you can tell that Villeneuve genuinely wants to complete his trilogy, with what he has going on here. And we can only, hope that it works, because he did do some weird things, in deviating that, really change the direction of the story. Like the whole thing with Chani and Paul being like, they are a lot more established as a couple. They aren't married in the books, but they've already had a kid. And that kid gets murdered by Sardaukar when Siege Tapar is captured. Like, that's the kind of thing that isn't happening in this for some reason. And I understand why, because like they're trying to streamline the story, trying to keep things moving and comprehensible. And they shrunk the amount of time it takes place in. But I am very interested in seeing how we get, this version of Chani, who is, I applaud them. They've made her a lot more interesting and given her a lot more agency. And I appreciated the fact that she was like viewing the whole prophecy thing as Paul just enslaving her people and using them as cannon fodder, for his, war across the universe. It's like, that doesn't sit well with her. So like, how are they going to get those two characters back together, especially now that he's, going to be, stupping, Princess Urulan, or not? Because I think that's what he doesn't, in the books, he like, absolutely, it's just a marriage of convenience. He is not, interested in, like having, an actual relationship with her. And, and of course that comes with its consequences. But what else was I gonna highlight here?
What about the I think one of the integral parts of both of the experiences of Dune Part 1 and 2 is the score. I mean, you got to mention Hans Zimmer's score. Like, I actually drove like an extra 20 minutes to see this film in a huge screen with like a Dolby Atmos sound system, and oh my god, my like teeth were like rattling in my head at some parts during the score. And I just think he used it so well. Everything from, you had mentioned it already, but starting the film with the black screen and that chant, even before we get any of like the WB logos or like the legendary logo. And, he's reusing a lot of the themes from the first film. And then he's making new ones for this one, like the sort of love theme that they come up with for Paul and Chani that is used throughout the movie in various incarnations. But yeah, I mean, Zimmer, there's really not much more to say about the guy because he's so established at this point, but it was just such a fantastic score.
It just fills the fucking room. Like, it almost feels like it's coming out of the screen itself. I don't know, like I'm seeing it at a shit AMC, like where imperfect. Like I envy, having an actually quality, cinema to go to, because I don't have any options.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I don't know, every time there was like a shot of like the white sky, like what's on screen right now, I could see like creases and wrinkles in the thing. like I don't know, it's such a shabby like we're never gonna get a movie stub sponsorship, so AMC, fuck you for not taking care of your customers. Like that's where I'm at with that. Because but that's the power of this movie. Even though I was like noticing all these aesthetic problems with the presentation, Zimmer's score it made the room rattle. I could hear light fixtures like getting buzzed, at certain parts when he's doing his like those weird synth pulls that's going on. And it just made the heart soar. Like every time, like even at the end, you could hear like soft, like you could hear like bagpipes of the Atreides theme, like as the Fremen are marching through the city, murdering everybody. Like, it's just everything I ever fucking wanted it to be. And it didn't do, and more importantly, like we've emphasized throughout this episode, it didn't bring modern day into it. It kept it authentic, it kept it real, and they just did nothing to cheapen it. Every creative choice enriched the cinematic experience as it should. And like you led with, like we should just be fucking glad that like $100 million or so can still be used for something that isn't fucking Kong x Godzilla, fucking the New Kingdom. It's actually something meaningful. Like, and frankly, if this is the movie of 2024, this is the best picture.
Certainly.
This is the best fucking movie you're going to see this year. I could be disabused of that, but the high I'm on now, I just don't see it happen. Yeah, and I'm a homer. I'm a homer, but I think even if you didn't know Dune before you saw the first one, this is the Return of the King. It's on that level for me. Like at this point, it's cracking my top 10 list.
Well, yeah, I think you're right on the money there. I think it's going to do gangbusters, and I guess that's a good place to transition to sort of the reaction to this film, both monetarily and critic-wise. I wanted to be sure to call both of these things out because I find so when Dune Part 1 came out, and we talked about this, I went back and watched our Dune review just to kind of check myself on my opinions and stuff. And one of the things that really irked me when the first part came out was this sort of half a story argument that people kept talking about where, part 1 is just half the story and that's why I didn't like it. And I don't know, I find that critique so short-sighted because we always knew that part 2 was eventually going to come out. And you instantly date your review by going that route with your argument, because now all of those reviews don't matter because we have part 2. And it, like you said, it should be really treated as one film, if anything. And of course now, logic sort of dictates that because they applied that argument to part 1, they should now apply it to part 2 because it's like the second half. But nobody is going to do that because this film has it's getting universal acclaim. And it's interesting that nobody's really acknoging that fact.
And then I'm almost done.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was to talk about the universal acclaim. It's so funny to me that sort of the usual suspects aren't coming out of the woodwork and having this movie ruined for them because of their sort of their morals or their political beliefs, because I'm not seeing the expected complaints about white savior narratives and sort of the portrayal of the Fremen as fanatical brown people that I would have expected to happen. And if anything, I think that it's just sort of evidence that when media gets to a certain level of quality, you sort of abandon all your scruples. These people, they're so quick to just be like, oh, my beliefs don't matter anymore, because either it's because they're afraid of being ostracized because they're one of the few voices that don't like the film, or it's because they have massive FOMO. I don't know what it is, but it's just funny that nobody is going with that lane this time.
Yeah, no, it's and like it's kind of been mentioned. It's like when you talk about great works of English literature from the 20th century, and people you talk about science fiction and fantasy, when they like in the 50s, not the 50s, like in the 70s when they selected what was the best of all time, it was this. It was above Lord of the Rings, it was above 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Foundation and all that. No, it was Dune. That was the one that's the power and relevancy of it. And in the light of Oppenheimer's success, the atomic mutually assured destruction thing is on people's minds, and this has something to say about that too, because that's not just something they put into it. That's from the text, and it's like a part of the universe that the understanding is if any royal house uses a nuke, you have a death sentence. We are now allowed to wipe you out because you've used it. And the fact that Paul used it on Arrakis is terrifying, because by the laws of the Landsrad, they now have to glass the planet and lose all their spice. So it's a radical thing that he's done. Go ahead, but please stop interrupting me, honey. We're almost done. And because you could bring the white savior shit, but in a way, Paul does, this new version of Paul does kind of acknowledge the fact of what he's doing, and he does have qualms about it. And it's handled in a way that, is, I think sincere and genuine, because when you get down to it, because this is inspired by Lawrence of Arabia. Was he a white savior, or did he just empower brown people to do something they always could have done? You know what I mean? And I think that's that's the neat debate that you actually get to see amongst the different generations of Fremen as well. It's it's a very well thought out work to begin with, but it was just nice to have a well thought out movie as well. Everything seems considered. And when something is that considered, and you can't just throw your trite opinion at it based on your ideological perspective and have that govern how you feel, that's a great movie right there. Yeah. And but from what I understand, there are some things that even didn't make it into the movie that were shot. So, because I remember seeing the behind the scenes photo of Tim Blake Nelson, but even Toofer was set to reappear. I didn't realize that.
Very, very interesting. I'm not going to take credit for this, but I had seen last night that there's this weird trailer that's on YouTube that is made for these really, really strange 270 degree movie screens that I can't remember what they're called, but they're basically
Screen X.
Yeah, Screen X, and there's only a handful of them even in the United States, but it's basically a movie screen where it's on all sides of you, basically in a 270 degree arc. And somebody they put a trailer on one of these screens, and in one of the shots in the trailer, you can see Toofer just standing there. It's the scene when Austin Butler, when Fade is getting his commendations or whatever. And so he's definitely there. He's definitely a prisoner of the Harkonnens.
And he's supposed to be there. He is supposed after Peter DeVries is killed at the end of the first one, the Baron Harkonnen is just well, I need a new Mentat anyway. You're working for me now. And he just kind of has to go along with it. And yeah, and that's what I mean. When he serves a purpose along with Gurney, because there's this cut plot line involving both of them where they both believe that Jessica, is the traitor, from the first movie, and they both have a moment where they consider killing her and have to be talked down. So it's just kind of repetitive, I guess. So I understand why they got him out. But I enjoyed that dude's portrayal of what a Mentat was. But yet again, it's just fan servicey to keep him in there unless it's absolutely necessary. Because this is, how Salt Bay is like always like slicing up that meat for you. Like, that's kind of what we got here. Like you could have the whole bone to gnaw on, but you're just getting the best bites.
Yes. Yeah, and speaking of, I think sort of the last thing I personally wanted to touch on was box office predictions, because the first Dune, if people will remember, was hampered by both COVID and a release on HBO Max. But the movie still made $433 million worldwide. And so I want to discuss, what do we think? Is this going to be the biggest movie of the year? If not, what is it going to be beaten by? I will say, I do have hot off the presses 20 minutes ago, they reported that the Friday night totals of Dune Part 2 was $32.1 million is what it made on Friday. And so it's on track for an $80 million domestic opening. And so, yeah, what do we think of this? Is it, is it going to hit $1 billion? Is it going to be the biggest movie of the year?
I don't think it'll hit $1 billion. I think it would be lucky to double the take from the first one.
Sure.
It's just the wrong time of year, for like that level of engagement. But maybe I'm wrong. I think because my theater was full, except for like the upper deck, all the prime seats were taken, and there is a lot of interest for it, and people do want a good reason to go to the movies again. And here we have one that isn't Madam Web. Gee, isn't that great? I hope people take advantage of it, because this time of year needs to stop just being a minefield. It'd be nice if there was more good releases scheduled for this time of year. And I don't know, if this had been a summer movie, I would feel like it could get that $1 billion. But yeah, they put it in the March slot instead.
Yeah, it's not unheard of that films, do well in March, because of course we have the Batman, the Robert Pattinson one did $1 billion in March, and
that movie
also
made $1 billion?
I think so. Yeah, or nearly, I believe.
Shit.
But
did not know that. I
think also Batman v Superman was also a March movie, and I think that did nearly that. But I think I agree with you. I don't think it will hit $1 billion. I think it'll probably top out at around like 750 million worldwide. This film does have the advantage of getting approved for release in China, so it is going to have all the Chinese money behind it. So, which is not something that always happens. But I do think it is gonna do gangbusters. I mean, it probably won't hit $1 billion, but it is still gonna do gangbusters. I don't think it probably won't beat like Deadpool and like Moana 2 and all that, but I think this will still probably be top 5 of the year as far as box office goes.
Any movie that has a 3:15 a.m. screening is probably in demand. That is a wild little factoid. I can't believe that. Like, granted, it's a 70 millimeter IMAX, and if you had enough people banging on your door, yeah, I'd stay open till 3 a.m. as well. But Jesus, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. Basically, I would encourage anybody to go read this article that Variety posted yesterday, because that's what Chuck's alluding to. It's basically the AMC in New York, the one where we actually saw Blade Runner, you and I, had a sold out showing at 3:15 a.m. on Friday night, Saturday morning. And the writer at Variety basically wrote about his experience and all the like crackheads that he saw there and stuff. And so it's pretty funny. Go over and read that at Variety. But yeah, I mean, that's I guess that's kind of Dune 2. I don't know, anything else you wanted to touch on before we start our wrap up process or anything?
Yeah, just that, put me in the ground. I can die happy. I don't need anything more in my life. But I guess my last comment, just in regard to the future, because we know for a fact, because of Hans Zimmer, that Villeneuve has given him the script for the in progress script for Dune Messiah, which is, I'm sorry he's viewing what he's doing as a trilogy, because it's not the case. Mm-hmm. But if he's gonna be done with it after Dune Messiah, I would pray that somebody takes up the Warner Brothers does what they do and just put it in the hands of somebody else. I hope they're capable for it, because Children of Dune and God Emperor of Dune are fucking weird, and Chapter House Dune and Heretics of Dune are even weirder. But I am here for them playing in this sandbox as long as they want to. This is my Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? And I want as much of it as I can get. Please give me more. Please give me more.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Moving on to the mentionables.
Yeah, my mentionable this week is an album, actually, and this is actually an album from way back in 2018. Sleep, the band Sleep, and the album is called The Sciences. And I picked this because we're talking about Dune, and I've been listening to this album all week because it's a good fit. Because if people don't know, the band Sleep is, I guess, considered a stoner metal band, which is sort of a fusion of psych rock and doom metal with like really chuggy riffs and long songs that sort of build up over time and lyrics that are usually about weed and smoking weed. And there's not a lot of good stoner metal bands out there, but Sleep is among the best. And this album, among many other things, has multiple songs that have Dune references and are about Dune. And I want to point people specifically to the song Giza Butler, where they sing about the Keef Sack Hasharak and the Bong Jabbar and the Bong Water of Life. And they basically are just having fun with wordplay and sort of connecting like weed and Dune references, and it's a lot of fun, and it's actually good and a good album too, which is not something. Yeah, it's pretty good
because I do have an appreciation for Dune inspired music. My favorite one, which coincidentally has a music video with Christopher Walken in it, is Fatboy Slim's Weapon of Choice, because it has that line about like you walk with no rhythm, so you won't attract the worm. For some reason, he inserted that in there. And my mentionable is also Dune related, because without Dune, there would be no Warhammer 40K. The whole thing about the narrow way, the golden path to paradise, that Paul is on, the whole thing about prescience and having all those experiences in you. That's how you, and the Great Crusade across the stars. That's the foundation of Warhammer. And I finally finished reading The End of the Death Volume 3 by Dan Abnett. And I'm euphoric right now. Like, all the things I've been into have been delivered, and they've stuck the landing. And this in particular, it just has, it just takes so many crazy things that you like, so many like plot threads that are all just bound into knots, and it all just winds up in a perfect little design by the end of it. Like, I know people aren't happy with how some of the characters met their fates, but I will let them nitpick that. You can only bitch about characters like Erebus just like ruining your experience. I'm just not one of those people anymore. But the final confrontation between Horus and the Emperor was so fucking good. It honored every because there's been multiple versions of this story over the years, and the question was, well, which version are we gonna get? And we get something that honors every version of the story that's ever been given. And I never thought he was gonna actually be able to pull that off. Because it's like all the things that we are told, like all the variations of like the final act, like, oh, a guardsman got in the way of Horus between the Emperor and sacrificed himself. No, it was a custodian. No, it was just like a random space marine. Like, we get all of it instead of none of it, or like only one of it. And it isn't schlocky and stupid. And by the end, I shed a tear. And I think that's what 40K is good for. It makes men cry.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining us. This was a barn burner. I apologize if my daughter got on the mic with her demands, but we did our best, and I've been looking forward to this episode ever since our first one. So I'm very glad we have crossed this threshold and can move onward into the future. Our minisode next week is going to be me picking up where Matt left off, where I'm going to check in on some of the redheaded stepchildren of the next generation that polluted the 90s. There's some good ones out there. So I have a recommendation for one you probably know, one you definitely don't, and one that is just too weird for any normal person to have sat down to watch at any point in their life. So I'm looking forward to that. And if all things go our way, we'll be getting a review of Love Lies Bleeding in 2 weeks. The trailer's got me really hyped for that one.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that one, and looking forward to your minisode. If you haven't already, go back and watch some of our more recent minisodes, because those seem to be the ones that people are watching. And so, if you're watching this and haven't done that or haven't subscribed, please do. I guess that's pretty much anything else you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, just thank you to everyone who watches, even if you're just some WhatsApp user from India who is thirst trapping Margaret Qualley. You're helping out, guys. You're helping out. Take care. Thanks, Matt.
Yep. See ya.